Hello and welcome to Drawing with Paige again. Um, so one of the things I was going to look at today is taking a figure and doing more of a historical costume, looking at scale and proportion, little tricks to think about when dealing with that. Um, so, uh, Good old trusty pencil here. So what I've started doing is I have my 8 head high figure, and I've lightly sketched in a face, and I have the body down. You can see with human proportion, like our elbows kind of hit at our waist, our wrist hits more at that mid, I guess you would call it the crotchal area, and our fingertips hit about mid thigh. I kind of do my little lobster claw hands here. And then, of course, knees, about that's, and then to the ankle. But if you look at the proportion, you can kind of see my little marks here where I've done the 8 heads and measure and scaled out the 8 head for the 8 head high figure. So I started lightly sketching in a bodice, and like the edge of the bodice here would be slightly curved because it is actually going around the curve. When you think the human figure, of course, we're dealing with a curved figure. How the neckline is open on the shoulder. If you get a neckline that's a little too far out here, what ends up happening is it'll tend to drop off. And that is a question that your cutter draper would have, is how do we see, or how are we going to keep this up? Typically, with a neckline like this, during this time period, the back, like if here are the shoulders, the back of the dress was actually very high and very straight across the back. So what that would do is pull that that neckline in to keep it from falling off of her shoulders. The seams for the sleeves at this point were fairly down low on the arm, and which also kind of restricted movement a bit. And this I have a whole theory kind of how that helped, stylize the dancing of the time. So if this is the natural waist, you would want to look at historical portraits to see where and how the scale of some of these things hit on the body. The sleeves typically were kind of like a mid and a little bit longer, like right before the elbow. And then you would see the decorative lace and things around the arm, and it was usually tiered. This was a time period where lace and accessories were very valuable because everything was handmade. So you would actually keep the lace and things from different clothing and transfer it over. Say if she had a little bit of a neckline lace, that it would actually stitch in and tuck in behind the bodice, and then could be removed and washed and cleaned, and also then saved for a different dress when the main material of this one wore out. So when you think of the bodices and how tight they were, and the stays that would go in the front. A stay is also, a lot of times corsets are referred to as stays. So I'll get this little guy sketched in here. And then the skirt itself, typically we think, and you've seen the pictures of those huge skirts that come out like from the Rococo. But when you start getting a little bit later, and you think about how the fabric falls, like this, if she has her hand on her fabric, it would actually compress the fabric a little bit. But what they would wear is what we would call a bum roll, and it would actually hold the skirt out, and it would be this, if you can imagine a little basically like a split donut that went under and then would tie in the front underneath all of this. And then you'd have petticoats and all to help hold the fabric of the dress up. Underwear was actually invented to help keep the outerwear from getting so dirty. So it was a practical piece. And this will be a split gown here. So we'll put this out here. So one of the things, you know, when you imagine like the size of the bum roll underneath, you know, and how does that fabric drape over that? Like how large was that? And so if you have a layer of petticoat that actually has ruffles on it, what does that do to the outer fabric? You know, how do a cutter draper is going to start looking at this going, okay, how much space is, you know, what's going on under there to help keep this shape, you know. And so I get this all penciled in, and we'll do this as a split. When you think about it, fabric is never actually straight. I know I'm drawing straight lines here, but it would actually have a little bit of texture along the edges, because when you look at fabric and how it actually bunches, and again, it's a curved line that goes around the body. Then I can go in and erase, because you want to make sure that your figure seam is grounded. And that's why drawing in the legs and then erasing them, it's still, it gives you the vision of what's imagining what's going on under there. Although there's been written accounts where men did not like all of the petticoats and things like that because it gave the illusion of a woman having larger birthing hips than she possibly could have, and so they felt it was false advertising. So, and let's see, this will actually close here. It'll open up. And then this was a lot of times where you would have, say, like a decorative petticoat that would have different layers of, you know, for ladies that had a lot of money. If you watch shows like Outlander, you'll see these kinds of clothing and things like that. And what's really kind of fun about that show is that because Claire is coming from the future, there are different like modern elements that she has sort of infused into her fashion. The fabrics are really lovely. The colors, if you look at, I follow a group called Medieval, oh gosh, it's sort of a medieval textiles, but they do dye work. And so they're really kind of fun to follow, so you can see a lot of medieval, what the colors actually were. And it goes medieval on because they were using the same plants and things for their dye work. So let me sort of get her arm back in here. So there would be a fold where the hand is. So, and one of the things to think about is, okay, so we know, and why we base a lot of stuff on the human head, our shoulders are typically one head width away, you know, out from our body. So if I'm looking at this and I'm basing all of this literally on the human head, I can see that the skirt comes out about, you know, like the bottom of the skirt would be almost a full head width out from the side of the arm. That the drop of the skirt is a little bit broader than the shoulder. So these are some of the things that a cutter draper is going to be looking for. And when they start doing mock-ups and things, when they're dealing with the dress form that of course doesn't have the head on it, you know, they're all Marie Antoinette, but this is how we start to look at scale and proportion and how wide, you know, like how big the bum roll is going to have to be, how big the petticoats are going to have to be, because you have to get your understructures before you get your outer structures. Mainly because if you fit all of this stuff without your proper undergarments and things, then when you actually get the undergarments, everything's going to fit differently, and you basically have to start over. So having all of your undergarments and things, especially if you're not doing a build or what's sometimes called a made to order, then it will affect all of your alterations. It affects your hemlines. It does all of that. So you want to make sure that when you're doing a period show, you want to get all of those understructures, get the ladies in their corsets, get the petticoats, get the bum rolls, all of typically shoes. A lot of times the hem is the last thing that we deal with. Because you want to get all of the alterations, making sure everything fits in the shoulders and in the body, because all of that's going to affect the way it all hangs. Corset and corset fitting, of course, is like a whole slew of other things to think about. Is you know, making sure that you're not strangling your actress. You should be able to breathe. You should be able to move. They were basically there to help the line of the clothing. It's if you think of it as like Spanx, you know, they were there for shapewear, not necessarily trying to do, when we got into the turn of the century where they were really shaping down the waist and getting that whole S curve look and things like that. But before that, it was shapewear and just what they felt like it was the fashion. Hair scale is interesting when talking to wig people. You know, they're looking at three things. They're looking at color, they're looking at texture, they're looking at style. You know, again, basing it on, okay, the bangs are coming a little bit this much before the eyebrows. It's an updo where it has a lot of texture to it. Then this part, scale-wise, is about half the head size. I tend to go with, I grew up in the 80s, so big hair is always a thing. I have one wig master that would literally look at me and she'd be like, so, Paige period prom hair? And I'm like, yes, Paige period prom hair. So we would, and she would go by that, and then we could adjust, because once you get it on a person's head, then you can see based on the scale of their own face if you need to make it smaller or bigger. You don't want to get too crazy with doing a whole lot of research pictures, because again, there's going to be little differences. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll narrow it down to one picture if I possibly can, or if I have 2 or 3 pictures, one of them is for color, one of them's for texture, the other one's for style. Or I can say, I love the front of this but I love these rolls that happen up here. Can we combine those two looks? So giving a wig master like, you know, 20 pictures is only going to confuse the matter, and they're actually going to get you to narrow down your decisions in what you really want. So this was a quick little tutorial on things to think about when you are sketching renderings, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Thank you. Bye.